Welcome to the Holistic Kid Show. My name is Zane.
My name is Imad.
And my name's Qasim.
We're the Holistic Kids here to educate us kids from the inside out. Have you ever wondered what actually helps people live a long, healthy life?
Like into the 90s or even the 100s?
Well, here's the wild part. It might all start before you're even born.
What?
Scientists say that the time between when you're a baby all the way through puberty is super important for your future health. And it also helps happens in your body and brain during those years. Can also shape how you feel when you're old. So today we are talking to someone who really knows all about growing up healthy, mentally,
Physically and emotionally can set up for an amazing life. We are so honored to speak with the one and only Jason Prall.
So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is our pleasure. Mr. Jason Prall is a health educator, practitioner, author, and filmmaker. In 2018, his independent research and experience as a practitioner led him to create the Human Longevity Project, a 9-part film series that uncovers the true natures of chronic disease in our modern world. Mr. Jason is also the author of the critically acclaimed book, Beyond Longevity, a proven plan for healing faster, feeling better, and thriving at any age. And he's currently working on his next film series that explores ancient methods of healing mind, body, and soul from indigenous cultures around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
So much.
My pleasure, guys.
This is going to be such an important conversation, but first, we wanted to know how you got started.
What made you want to be a filmmaker and author?
Good question. So I actually had my own health challenges that started when I was just 13 years old. So when I was 13, I had knee pain that started seemingly like any other knee pain. Went to the doctor and they told me that it was due to overuse. I was playing too much sports. Well, at 13, that confused me because I was 13 and all my idols that played in the NBA and the NFL, they were like 35, 40, right? And they didn't have the knee pains that I had, or maybe they did, but at least they were 40. So how could this be that I had overuse of my knees? Nevertheless, I was told to stay off my knees, to stop playing sports for a little while, and then that would resolve the issue. Unfortunately, it never did. And that knee pain stayed with me for the next couple decades, 20, 25 years. That knee pain consistently was with me. And all the while, I had other issues pop up in my 20s. I had skin issues. And the medical system at the time that I was interacting with was not sufficient. It wasn't providing me answers for my health issues. So I had to find the answers myself. And that's what led me into the holistic, integrative, functional medicine world to really understand what health is and where it comes from. And what I ended up learning along the way was that it's really in our habits. It's how we think, how we feel, how we connect with others. Of course, what we're eating, how we're moving, how we're sleeping. All of our behavioral patterns, all of our thought patterns, all of our emotional patterns, these are the things that primarily govern our health issues on the long term. Now, we can have these things that happen along the way, car accidents, getting hit in the head. There's all kinds of acute issues that can come up. But it is the things that we do over and over again that dictate our health. And so that's what prompted me to make the Human Longevity Project film series, to help illustrate what are the things that some of the healthiest and longest living people around the world, what are they doing? How did they grow up? What is their wisdom that they can share with us? And how can we apply that in our Western world?
That is amazing.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So why do grown-ups say being healthy starts when you're a baby, even before you're born?
This is a good question. So even in the anti-aging or longevity world that exists out there, there's a lot of people looking at what are the habits, what are the diets, what are the things that we're doing in adulthood and even in our elderly years that are contributing to longevity. But oftentimes they forget sometimes that it's really what happens between essentially when we're conceived until maybe 15 or 20 years old that really shapes who we become. So many of us, myself and many other health practitioners even, we don't wake up to the fact of the things that we did when we were children that weren't that healthy, right? The foods that we're eating. As kids, most of us aren't really aware of the decisions that we're making. In fact, most of the decisions we're making aren't really our decisions. They're our parents' decisions or our caregivers' decisions, right? And we're just going along with what we are being taught. So everything that happens in that developmental phases that you kids are in now, these are the experiences, the diets, the movement patterns, the ways of thinking, our beliefs. These all shape who we become, right? When we're children, we're not fully developed. Our brains aren't fully developed. Our bodies aren't fully developed. Even our mind and our ideas aren't fully developed. So we're constantly evolving. We're constantly growing. And this is a very real thing. Our tissue is still growing. Our brains are still growing. Our worldview is still growing. And so all those things that shape us mentally, emotionally, and physically during those childhood years, they lay the foundation for what we then do when we're on our own. And we do get to make our choices and our decisions. So as we become adults, 18 or 22, whenever we leave the house, what are the choices that we're making? What are the foods that we're eating? How are we exercising? How are we relating to our family, to our friends, to strangers, right? What are the things that we are doing on a consistent basis after we leave the house? So those tend to be the really, really important characteristics or traits or habitual patterns that we take with us. And if those are thrown off, if they aren't ideal, or if they're really contributing to poor health, then it becomes this process of uncovering what those things are. And by that time, our entire biology has been shaped by those. How our detoxification systems work, how our digestive system works, how our immune system functions, how our brain patterns are consistent, right? These are all shaped by what happens when we're kids. So even though we don't know it when we're kids, the things that we're doing are critically important to set the stage for good habitual patterns of the mind, patterns of the emotion, and patterns literally in the body, physiological, biological patterns that are going to express when we are older.
What about babies and little kids? Is there stuff they need besides just food and sleep to be healthy, later on?
Absolutely. Yeah. Good question. So babies so here's a funny story. So I have a 5-year-old. Okay. And he had a very active childhood. And what I mean is we had lots of experiences. We did a lot of world travel. We did a lot of fun things. And I remember asking him, maybe I think when he was 4, if he remembered something that happened last year when he was 3. And he said no. And so it hit me, it dawned on me that most of the things in his life so far, he's never going to remember, right? So his brain is really not going to remember any of this stuff. So I thought that's funny because these things that are happening in these early years, we don't really remember consciously when we're older, most of us. But nevertheless, all the experiences are happening at a different level of the mind. They're happening subconsciously. So what's really, really important is, of course, love and care and connection and safety. So if a baby or a young toddler never really feels safe, right? Maybe they're hungry and they're not getting tended to. Maybe they need a diaper change and they're not getting tended to. Maybe they just feel alone because they don't have a lot of close touch and connection. These things that maybe we're missing, and maybe the caregivers or parents don't even realize how important this stuff is, or they're trying out a parenting method that is less than optimal. What will happen is that the child's whole body systems will configure to this lack of safety. So it's like a subtle energy. It's this feeling of I'm not safe that a baby can feel, even though they can't consciously think I'm not safe like you guys can. When you feel unsafe, you can recognize I feel unsafe most of the time. A baby can't consciously understand that, but they can feel it. And their nervous system, their brain, will recognize this feeling of lack of safety. So the whole body will respond in that way. However, when the baby does feel safe, when it feels content, then all the body systems relax. The digestive system starts to work, right? The detoxification systems work. Everything happens the way it should when the baby feels safe and connected and loved. So those are the primary things. Those three things I would say that a baby and a young toddler really needs is this safety, this connection, and this love.
Wow. I mean, that is really, really interesting to think about, because like we talked a little bit about how our feelings and emotions might shape our future. So how do our feelings, like being loved or stressed, affect our body when we grow up?
This is a good question. And there's so many ways that this happens that it might be hard for me to encapsulate, but I'll give you an idea from my own childhood that I remember. And I remember loved ones telling me sometimes, because I was a pretty emotional child. And I remember some of my loved ones saying, stop being so emotional. And this can happen when a parent or a caregiver is feeling overwhelmed. And I have an emotional child too. So I know what this is like when they're 3 and 5, and there's just a lot of emotions. And these emotions can be big and erratic and all over the place. And it can be hard to handle sometimes. So I remember receiving that as a child. Stop being so emotional, right? But I didn't have the wherewithal and the understanding that I do now. I was just a child. All I heard was the way that my body perceived that and my emotions perceived that was, you're not okay as you are. I need you to change, right? I don't love you like the way that you are. I need you to change. That's the feeling that we feel sometimes as kids if we get that type of response. So that was something that I took on subconsciously, that I'm not loved, or I'm not okay, or I'm not accepted when I am this way. So I must change to be this way, and then I will be accepted and loved, okay? And again, I wasn't consciously thinking that, but this is what emotionally happens. Now, I also remember when I was, let's say, 10 or 12 or 15, when I was playing a lot of sports. I played baseball, I played football. And I remember coaches telling me, don't be emotional. So during the games, stay even keel, stay in the center. Don't get too excited. Don't get too down on yourself. Stay basically emotionless, right? So what this was training me, my coaches and my loved ones, without me even being consciously aware, was suppress your emotions. Don't engage with your emotions. Emotions are not beneficial. So I was being taught and trained to bury my emotions, to contract and to suppress my emotions. Now, when I'm an adult, that's actually not a beneficial thing. I want to feel, even as kids, we want to feel our emotions. We want to recognize what emotions we're feeling. We want to feel them fully. When we feel sad, we want to feel sad. When we feel happy, we feel happy. When we feel disappointment or frustration, these are just emotions. They're not bad or good. They just are. The good thing is that we want to feel them, move them, process them in a healthy way, and then we come back to neutral or to baseline or to contentment. And so that's just one example that if we aren't taught to, or if we're taught certain ways to deal with our emotions, to certain emotional patterns or experiences that are quite common. There's lots of kids that grow up in a very difficult environment one where there's not, food safety, like there's not consistent food, or it might be a violent environment. These things will shape the person as a child we adapt to the environments that we're in. So if we're in a home with love and openness, then we can adapt to that, and we can express ourselves openly. If we're not, and it's a more contracted environment, a difficult environment, a dangerous environment, then we often mold to fit that environment so that we survive and that we're accepted. Because as I said with the baby, there's fundamental needs that all humans have. One is safety. We need to feel safe. We're looking for safety. Another one is connection. So we want to feel connected. So if we're not getting connection, like when I felt my loved one said, "Stop being so emotional," that was a feeling of disconnection. So in order for me to get connection, I'm going to adapt to their desires to suppress my emotions so that I feel connection. So safety and connection and love, right? So that's what we end up molding to in order to get those things met. And so that's why the environment is so critical, because it shapes us emotionally and mentally as we get older.
Wow. So wait, you were mentioning a lot about different households and different environments. Maybe so what if you have maybe a rough childhood? Can you still live a long, healthy, happy life?
This is a very good question. And the answer is yes, absolutely. So that's the short answer. There's also a lot of scientific data and research on this, namely a very famous study called the ACEs study, ACES study. And what it showed was that children that have these adverse childhood experiences, in other words, rough things happen. Could be parents divorcing, it could be abuse, it could be neglect. They identified 10 of them, but there are many more. That the more of these that we experience, these adverse experiences, the more chronic disease tends to show up in our adult life. So we get depression, we get anxiety, we get autoimmune conditions, we get cancers, digestive issues. All of these things start to happen when we get more of these difficult experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean that has to be the case. All of this means that we have these adverse childhood experiences is that there may be something as an adult that we want to go process appropriately. So maybe we need some various forms of therapy. And there are many amazing therapeutic tools that we can use to process some of these experiences so that we can express our biology, our body, our mind, and our emotions in a healthy way. So it just means that we need some work. The really interesting thing is that every human on the planet has difficult experiences, whether it's from school, from sports, from parents. It doesn't matter. We all have these. And so there's always an opportunity to process these with various forms of therapy. But some, of course, have it much more difficult than others.
Yeah. And that's why it's really sad that people might their environments might not be as physically well, which puts even more pressure on the next generation inside that environment to not be physically or mentally well.
Yeah,
So,
we always respond for sure. And I think oftentimes we rebel, or we often do the opposite of what happened to us as children. So whatever environment we grew up in, we learn lessons. Some people come from a divorced parent household, and there's lessons that come from that, and there's challenges. So the interesting thing is, no matter how perfect or imperfect our childhood was, we're always going to take away lessons, and there's always things that we might want to do differently when we become parents. So that's the funny thing. And generally, there's things that we want to do the same. So there's always opportunities, and we're always learning. And so there really is no perfect way to go about this, and there's no way to screw it up.
that is amazing.
Amazing.
So, what is one tip that
Sorry, one sec, guys. One sec.
Yeah.
I got an alarm going off here.
Mhm.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
If you could change one thing about how kids grow up today, what would it be? Because we want people to maybe leave this podcast with at least one
Something.
thing that they can maybe change.
So, boy, good question. It's really important to eat real food.
Oh yes.
Okay. It's really important to connect with nature in the real world. I think this is probably the biggest challenge that I see that parents have as well as children have today is this relationship with technology. It is a double-edged sword. Look at what we're doing right now. The fact that you guys are doing this show is beyond amazing. And I'm confident that all the things that you guys gain from doing this will contribute to an amazing future for you. And without the perspective that if we are surrounded by technology and we are so immersed in technology, it will lead to unhealthy outcomes. We are from the earth, right? We need to understand this. And there's a real opportunity to re-engage with the natural world. And as simple as it is, just getting outside, getting light in our eyes, on our skin, touching the grass, being amongst nature is so unbelievably healthy that I think there's a big part of the population that is missing out on the health benefits that come from being outside. My generation, we didn't have technology. We had Nintendo. We had these little TVs that you had to turn dials. Like we were outside most of the day and we didn't get in trouble because we missed lunch and sometimes even missed dinner and come home super late because we were in the woods all day. This still happens in some places in rural areas, but many kids are on computers. They're coding at 8, and again, there's a real positive to technology, but really understanding the dynamic and the relationship with technology in a healthy way is going to be the big opportunity that we have going forward.
And I also wanted to mention blue zones.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are confused why these blue zone areas are so much, they live so much longer than in normal areas, like in normal urban environments around the world. So can you please explain to us a little about that?
Yeah. So this actually ties into what I just mentioned. If you can imagine, these are places around the world: Icaria in Greece, Sardinia, which is an island off of Italy, Okinawa near Japan, and the Guanacaste region of Costa Rica. If you can imagine growing up without electricity, no cars, no refrigeration, no electric lights, it's like you're camping, if you've ever been camping, but instead of camping for a weekend, that's your entire life. So you're growing your own food. There's a village-like atmosphere. You might be walking 30 miles a day for certain things. Water doesn't come out of a tap necessarily. And if it does, it's not like what we have here. Everything is different. That's the environment that many of these people grew up in. So when we look at why they lived a long time, we have to first put ourselves in that context of living up until you're 20 or 30 before you're even getting electricity, before you even see electricity hit your village. So they were so in touch with nature. They lived off the food that comes from the land. They didn't have processed and packaged foods. So when you guys go into a grocery store, if you were to make your own decisions and mom and dad were not part of it, what would you choose to eat? Most kids, I know my kid and I know myself as a kid, I would go to the things that taste good. You guys have a little bit more knowledge than I did when I was a kid, but still you would have to say no to all that yummy food that's in the middle of the grocery store, right? And you'd have to consciously say, no, I'm going to avoid all that tasty stuff. And let me go here and get my peppers and my broccoli and my carrots and my potatoes, right? That is a difficult choice. And this is what most Westerners have to deal with, even if they even have healthy foods. Some places are in sort of food deserts, which means that there's not really any healthy food options, or there's not much healthy food options. So we have to say no to all the yummy, processed, packaged, colorful foods that are designed to taste good. These people in the blue zones never had to make those choices. They didn't have those decisions to make. They ate what grew in their gardens. They ate whatever animals that were around them, usually chickens and pigs and cows and goats, or sheep in the case of Sardinia. So they lived a completely different reality. And one of the biggest lessons that we can learn from these people in the blue zones is to live more in nature, to follow nature's rhythms. When do we go to bed? When is the sun going down? When is the sun coming up? Right? How much do we move throughout the day? How do we interact in a more communal setting? How do we get to know our neighbors? How do we rely on people outside of our family? These are the things that they had. They had support networks. They had safety in the community, in the village. They had natural rhythms that they attended to. So it was a very different reality. And there's a lot of reasons that they may have lived a long time, but primarily it comes down to the simple ways that they live that are in touch with nature.
So
And
inspirational.
that's amazing.
Inspiring.
So, and I also wish that maybe, I don't know if we're gonna definitely go completely do that, but maybe if we could go a little bit more in that direction, instead of filling the grocery markets filled with ultra processed food and
artificial dyes on like donuts or something.
yeah.
Absolutely. I grew up on that stuff. When I was a kid, there wasn't a huge awareness around these, at least in the people that I knew. And so this was just what we ate, right? And it had to do more with cost. And sure, we knew a little bit about health. We knew that certain cereals and things weren't the best, but there wasn't as much awareness as there is now. And I agree with you. There's no way that we in the West are going to go live like they did, right? We're not going to ditch all of our electricity and our refrigeration and our modern food system. It would not be good. But if we can understand the concepts that I'm saying, then we can bring them into our life in a way that makes sense, right? We can start to maybe grow our own garden. And maybe that starts off with just an herb garden. Maybe we're just growing sage and thyme, and maybe then we start doing some garlic and carrots. Whatever it is, it just means, how do we interact with our world in a way that is a little bit more natural, something that humans have been doing for thousands of years? And how do I interact with the light cycle, going to bed at the right time, getting up in the morning, getting for kids, this isn't as much of an issue, although it's becoming more of an issue. But how do I go outside and just get outside and get that light in my eyes? That is so, so important, to get the natural light on our skin and in our eyes and playing outside, that it's critical for kids and adults.
Yeah. And so we can't fully go back to and then you said, so
Like in Chicagoland, we grow our own food too.
yeah, you have a garden.
Beautiful.
And
I first learned to grow food when I had my house in Seattle, and I was 27, 28 years old. That was when I first started growing food, and I didn't know what I was doing. But what I learned was that it's not that hard. You just need to understand soils, lights, temperatures. And when you do that, it becomes more of a play. And what's cool is nature does all the work, right? As long as you give the plants the right environment, you can just sit back and nature will do its magical thing. And you got amazing food, right? It's a really cool thing. There's something different about eating a cucumber from your garden compared to the cucumber you got at the store. The strawberry that you got in your garden, it tastes different because you grew it and you know how much time it took and you know the effort it took, and it's grown in good soil, and there's a little bit of an ownership. So there's something really beneficial about growing your own food.
That's amazing. So, where can people learn more about you and your amazing work?
Yeah, they can find most of my documentaries and interviews and things that I've done in courses at awakenedhealthacademy.com. And I also own a brain balancing center here in San Diego called Cereset, which is Cereset. And you can go to cereset.com. And there's locations all around the US. And this is an amazing technology that uses EEGs it's an advanced form of neurofeedback, if people are familiar with that. And it's amazing for kids all the way up. We've had people in their 90s using this technology to balance the brain, to help resolve anxiety and depression and sleep issues and chronic fatigue and PTSD and traumatic brain injuries. So I'm really passionate about that technology. Again, you can go to cereset.com to find a location. There's about 50 around the US and even a couple outside the US.
We'll definitely check that out.
Definitely.
Sorry, say that again?
Definitely check that out.
Yes,
everyone here should go definitely check that out.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Mr. Jason. This was such an amazing and empowering episode. We know you are busy, so we are so thankful for your time and wisdom today.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it. Great work.
Now time to recap Mr. Jason's key points.
Health is in our habits. How we move, sleep, how we eat, connect with others, our emotional patterns. It is the things we do over and over again that determines our health.
What happens in childhood makes a big difference in our overall health. Everything that happens in our childhood now shapes who we are, who we become. When we are kids, we aren't fully developed, and we're constantly evolving, constantly growing. Our world view is still growing. All those things that shape us to become who we are meant to be.
So ask yourself, what are the choices we are making daily? What are the things we are doing consistent basis after we leave our houses? Our biology is shaped as we are kids. What we do every day is critically important to set us up for either success or failure. It also is really important to eat food and connect with the real world. We need to control our bodies and our gardens and what we put in our body. So eat real food, because whatever you eat goes inside and it becomes you.
Yes. 100%. Love, care, and connect are important for anyone, especially as babies. When the baby and kids feel safe, their body works the best it possibly can.
And it is really important to feel your feelings. Your feelings is important no matter how perfect and imperfect our childhood is.
Like laughing.
There is always opportunities to thrive. There's so much we can do in decision to make every day that can determine our future. So thank you again, Mr. Jason, for coming on our podcast. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Zansari.
I'm Imad.
And I'm Carson.
Follow my family and I on social media, Holistic Mom D, and look out for our book, The Teen Health Revolution, releasing November 13th this year. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I'm kids need to learn for other kids, please. Please download our podcast on iTunes and leave reviews so other kids and families can benefit. We need to create a healthy future for all of us and the planet. Join us next week for another episode of the Holistic Kid Show, where kids are empowering kids. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.